Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the channel. We're actually dealing today with Brexit. This is the biggest event that happened in British politics for a whole generation. We're going to look at the background of that event and come back to Nigel Farage and Margaret Thatcher. They were never happy with the European situation. And we're also going to focus in on how it impacted Northern Ireland and how it's likely to affect Ireland in the future. Thank you very much for watching, and please subscribe to the channel. This video will focus on how Britain left the EU and how that decision may impact Ireland in the future. Most politicians and people at the time thought that Brexit would strengthen partition within Ireland. Henceforth, there would be two great centres of power, Brussels and London, with the Republic of Ireland centred on one and the North on the other. And this would involve a hard border in Ireland. However, that's not what happened. As the Brexit negotiations developed, Britain found itself forced to weaken its relationship with Northern Ireland in order to maintain a positive trading relationship with the EU. There were actually four separate powers involved: the EU, the UK, the Republic of Ireland, and Northern Ireland, with the EU dominating the situation and Northern Ireland finding its position undermined. The Unionists in Northern Ireland strongly supported Brexit. They thought it would strengthen the union with Britain. On the other hand, nationalists in Northern Ireland were very much opposed to it, as they feared it would lead to the re-emergence of a hard border. When Brexit actually took place in June 2016, David Cameron, the Prime Minister, was quickly replaced by Theresa May. A few months later, in October 16, the new Prime Minister gave a commitment that there would be no return to a hard border in Ireland. This commitment, also known as the Backstop, it was later called the Protocol and then the Windsor Framework, but they all meant the same thing, that there would be no hard border in Ireland, which meant in effect that there would have to be a border down the Irish Sea. This was very bad news for Unionism. It meant that Brexit would weaken their position within the UK, so naturally they were outraged by these developments. In March 2017, Theresa May began a 2-year process in order to leave the EU. This would involve a lot of negotiation, especially in regard to four major issues. 3 months later, in June 2017, she called a general election, hoping to strengthen her position in regard to the negotiations ahead. However, this gamble backfired as she lost the small majority she had in the Commons and ended up dependent on the Unionist party, the DUP, for support. The negotiations with the EU revolved around a number of key issues: the rights of EU citizens within the UK, future trading relationships between Britain and the UK, a compensation package to be paid to the EU by Britain, and finally there was the thorny issue of the only land border between the EU and Britain, which is also the border which actually divides the north and south of Ireland. Theresa May already had given a commitment the previous year in regard to the backstop. This was in line with the Good Friday Agreement, that there would be no hard border in Ireland. That meant that there would have to be some form of a border down the Irish Sea, and despite the pressure from the DUP and their increased political power at Westminster, they found it impossible to get the Prime Minister to change her position on this issue. Theresa May and her team eventually produced what became known as the Chequers Plan. This plan envisaged a kind of free trade relationship between the UK and Europe. It contained a lot of technical detail regarding the movement of goods. In July 2018, the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson objected to May's plan and approach and resigned. EU Chief Negotiator Michel Barnier also rejected the plan, saying that with the EU you were either in or out. There could be no free trade if you were not a member. A few months later, in November 2018, a more modified agreement was reached between the negotiating teams. This was a kind of customs union, whereby there would be no need for a land border in Ireland or a border down the Irish Sea. So the withdrawal agreement was signed by both sides in November 2018. The final step of the process was to pass the agreement through the House of Commons. However, the Brexiteers and Unionists in the Commons recognised the agreement for what it was. It did not give Britain full independence. It tied Britain to Europe in terms of trade. Several amendments were put forward in the early months of 2019. Much of the debate was captured on live TV. The Prime Minister found herself in a terrible position by the middle of the year. Time was running out. She couldn't get the agreement through the Commons, nor have it renegotiated with the EU. In this scenario, she had no option but to resign in July 2019. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson was planning his next move from the backbenches. He had correctly judged that the agreement would not get through the Commons. The DUP were also critical of male state. Like the Brexiteers, they want to get rid of the backstop and to have a hard border in Ireland. The big question now was, could Johnson deliver where May had failed? He became Prime Minister in August 2019 and began with a tough line. He refused all further negotiations with the EU unless the backstop was scrapped and a land border permitted in Ireland. However, Johnson soon was forced to deal with reality. He realised he could not afford a no-deal Brexit, as it could ruin the British economy and also possibly the Tory party. In this scenario, he agreed to have Northern Ireland treated separately to the rest of the UK. In effect, he agreed to the backstop, but at this stage it was given a new name, the Protocol. It meant, in effect, that there would be no hard border in Ireland, but instead one down the Irish Sea. He met with Taoiseach Leo Varadkar and EU officials in regard to this matter and accepted these arrangements. Naturally, Unionists were quite angry with this arrangement. They had fought for years against it. Jeffrey Donaldson became leader of the DUP in June 2021. He withdrew his party from Stormont, objecting to the new protocol. He got minor changes made over the next couple of years and rebranded it as the Windsor framework. But it was still basically a border down the Irish Sea, or Theresa May's backstop under another name. Some people see Brexit and the rift between Britain and Unionism as a major step towards unity in Ireland. It certainly makes trade with the south of Ireland easier relative to Britain, which is quite a bit more complicated now. It follows on actually from a number of previous setbacks for unionism in Ireland, such as the reforms in the 1970s, the collapse of Stormont in 1973 and the Downing Street Declaration, and then in 1998 the Good Friday Agreement. Brexit, however, was a deliberate decision by the British establishment to put their own economic and business interests ahead of their relationship with unionism in Ireland. It's very much in line with the statement of Peter Brook in 1993, however, when he said that Britain had no selfish economic or interest in Northern Ireland. So although Brexit is undoubtedly another setback for unionism, the future of Northern Ireland is very much in the hands of the people of Ireland as a whole, as set out in the Good Friday Agreement. Okay, so that's the story about Brexit. That's it for today. That's more or less wrapped up. As I said, it's for the people of Northern Ireland to decide the issue of the future in relation to what they want to do. I'll be trying to make other videos in relation to Irish history and American history and politics and current affairs. If you're interested in those topics, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for watching for today.